Recently, the Philippine government, supported by the United States and other countries, despite China's dissuasion, he insisted on invading Renai Shoal in the Nansha Islands, received a strong counterattack from China. The actions of the Philippines directly triggered a further escalation of tensions. According to reports, the Chinese Coast Guard has boarded for inspection under the framework of the new regulations. Forced eviction. 8 Filipino special forces were handed over. In less than 24 hours, the warships of the 4 countries quickly entered the waters of the South China Sea, showing a strong sense of provocation. In this multi-party competition, the positions and actions of China and the Philippines are quite profound. In addition, the United Kingdom took the initiative to find a reasonable reason for the United States not to dare to send troops. New rules in the South China Sea. China's legal reliance escalates. Since the regulations on administrative law enforcement procedures of Coast Guard agencies came into effect on June 15, the Chinese Coast Guard has, in accordance with the new regulations, begun more standardized management of foreign vessels and personnel crossing the border. This new regulation not only provides a clear legal basis for the Chinese Coast Guard, it also refines and enhances its standards of behavior when performing tasks. According to the China Coast Guard, the new regulations were implemented in less than 48 hours. 1 Philippine replenishment ship and 2 inflatable boats invaded, attempted to transport prohibited building materials, weapons and ammunition to illegal sitting beach warships. This malicious act is a direct provocation against China. It also exposed the risky strategy adopted by the Philippines on the South China Sea issue. In the face of provocations from the Philippines, the Chinese Coast Guard responded promptly. China Coast Guard spokesperson Gan Yu pointed out, the Philippine replenishment ship violated the international regulation for preventing collisions at sea. The Chinese Coast Guard has taken control measures in accordance with the law. This operation is not only reasonable and legal, but also reflects the professionalism and standardization of the Chinese Coast Guard in carrying out its tasks. Analysts believe that the key phrase regulated by law, marking the way the Chinese Coast Guard handles cross-border vessels. From the previous warning and expulsion phase, it has risen to a more systematic and legal processing stage. In the future, the Chinese Coast Guard will follow the new regulations in the South China Sea, take more efficient and effective countermeasures against Philippine vessels and personnel to ensure that national interests are not violated. Philippine cooperation with extraterritorial powers. What is the intention? Although China continues to strengthen and improve its law enforcement methods and improved its maintenance capabilities in the South China Sea, the Philippines has not stopped and continues to plan to cooperate with external forces to destabilize the region. Shortly after the Renai Shoal incident, the Philippines quickly rallied the United States, Japan, and 3 so-called allies. A number of destroyers and frigates were dispatched to stage an exercise in the South China Sea called Maritime Multilateral Cooperation Activities. If you can't beat it, you can call it someone. The Philippines attempt to use the military might of these countries to strengthen its own momentum. It's completely adding fuel to the fire, and it can't help but make people laugh. The United States says it is working with its Indo-Pacific allies. The goal is to demonstrate a shared commitment to the international order, to ensure that aircraft and ships of all countries enjoy freedom of navigation within the limits permitted by international law. Obviously, this is not another incident in the South China Sea under the banner of freedom of navigation by the U.S. and Western countries. Earlier this year, the U.S. military emphasized this issue during a joint exercise with the Philippine Army and to put pressure on the outside world through a show of force. However, the U.S. side chose to go to the South China Sea as soon as the new regulations were implemented. In the South China Sea, This move is clearly intended to demonstrate against China, trying to stop the Chinese Coast Guard from transporting resupply ships to the Philippines. China's response: firm position and tough countermeasures. Faced with the frequent military activities of the United States, the Philippines, and other countries in the South China Sea, Lin Jian, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, made a tough statement. He pointed out that the Philippines should recognize that attracting extraterritorial forces to demonstrate force and create friction in the South China Sea, it will only further exacerbate tensions and undermine regional stability and peace. Lin Jian made it clear, if these extraterritorial countries continue to provoke confrontation in the South China Sea, China will take all necessary measures. We shall resolutely safeguard China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. Peace and stability in the South China Sea are not only the common aspiration of countries in the region, it is also a goal that China firmly upholds. We will respond firmly to any threats. China will not sit idly by regarding these external interference acts. To ensure long-term peace and security in the South China Sea, in fact, despite the aggressive arrival of ships from countries such as the United States and Japan, but in practice, they did not dare to take further provocative actions. The Chinese Coast Guard not only successfully boarded the ship for inspection, also through effective means of communication, persuaded and eventually drove away the Philippine ships. This successful operation demonstrates the exceptional courage and skill of the Chinese Coast Guard. It also proves that countries such as the United States and Japan, although they seem to support the Philippines on the surface, but in practice, it will not take further measures rashly. Why doesn't the U.S. send troops? Britain finds a way for the U.S. to step down. Regarding the invasion of Renai Shoal in the Philippines, the West has begun to look for a way out for the United States not to send troops. A paper published by the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom analyzes the mutual defense treaty between the United States and the Philippines. From a legal perspective, it provides an explanation for the United States to not send troops. The paper points out that when the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty was signed in 1951, the Philippines has not made any claims to the South China Sea. This means that under the treaty, the United States is not obligated to protect the Philippines' illegal interests in the South China Sea through military means. To put it bluntly, the transportation of subsidies in the Philippines is illegal. The encroachment on reefs is also illegal. The United States really has no faith to send troops because of this. The British argument provides a reasonable step for the United States, while maintaining diplomatic support for the Philippines. There is no need to get caught up in a direct military confrontation with China. From historical experience, the United States tends to take a cautious approach when it comes to the interests of its allies. The likelihood of a full-scale war is extremely low. For countries like the Philippines, U.S. support is more symbolic, rather than actual military intervention. In this context, the U.S. position on the Philippines will appear even more tenuous and uncertain. During the Renai incident, the Chinese Coast Guard not only successfully contained the provocative actions of the Philippines, it has also demonstrated China's law enforcement capabilities in the South China Sea through specific actions. This successful case has not only strengthened China's voice over the South China Sea issue, it also provides a solid foundation for possible future challenges. In the short term, the Philippines' strategy of fake tiger power may bring certain tensions to the regional situation, but in the long run, this reliance on external forces is very likely to lead to fire. In the process of continuously improving its own law enforcement means and enhancing its law enforcement capabilities, it will gradually solidify its dominance in the South China Sea. The international community, especially the extraterritorial forces, needs to recognize the situation clearly. Stop provoking confrontation and truly contribute to peace and stability in the South China Sea.